anyone's not back from break, they can join in with us when they get back. My name is Michael Muse, and I am the director of the Stafford County Department of Social Services. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit this evening about human services, the Stafford County Human Services Office, as well as the Stafford County Social Services Department, and many of the things that we do. This is Nicole Curvin. She's the Assistant Director of the County Social Services Department, and she will be talking with you about some of the programs that we offer and provide to the citizens of the county as well. I was beginning to get a little bit nervous when George started talking about SNAP and TANF and Medicaid. I thought he was going to do my presentation too. So I will try to give you lots of good information, but keep it as brief as we can. Probably if you have an agenda, one of the things on your agenda is Donna Kraus, who is the director of the county's Human Services Department, and she was unable to be with you all tonight. She sends her regrets, but did ask me to share a little bit of information about the functions of her office as well. So I'm going to share some of that information with you at the outset, and then I'll move into social services, which is my department. But I work, of course, very closely with Donna and the Human Services Office as well. Donna has a very small office, including herself, in the Comprehensive Services Act, or the Children's Services Act. There are only 3 employees, so it's a very small office. But some of the things that the Human Services Office does for the county that I want to share with you is they do manage the Children's Services Act. And the Children's Services Act in Virginia funds all the services for at-risk youth. The program also serves children in the custody of the Department of Social Services, so that's children that's in the custody of my department and are in foster care. And each locality across the Commonwealth has a Comprehensive Services Act program, or a CSA program, which is meant to provide funding for services that at-risk children may be in need of to help strengthen the family as well as to strengthen the child and to meet the needs that the child has so that they can live a happy and productive life in their community setting. How are decisions made in terms of the CSA funding? It's through a collaborative process. The Children's Services Act has what we call pool funding. When the act was created in the early 1990s, it pulled funding from multiple different agencies and put all the money in one pot, which kind of forced agencies that are represented by the Children's Services Act to get together and make decisions in a way that they collaborated because they're all dealing with the same children, one of those being the Department of Social Services, the Juvenile Court Services Unit, the Health Department, the schools, as well as the Community Services Board. So all those agencies have to get together in what's called a Family Assessment and Planning Team, or FAPT, and there's a representative from each agency that helps make the decisions and brings their expertise and resources to bear in making decisions for the children that are brought before them, and the funding in terms of the services that may be best able to equip the children and to help them with whatever their needs might be to help both the child as well as their family. The philosophy of the Children's Services Act is family-focused and child-centered in their approach to service delivery, and they try to focus as much as they can on prevention services to preserve and strengthen the family unit, as I mentioned, and providing services such as in-home counseling, substance abuse counseling for children, which is one of the things that we were just talking about with the opioid and heroin crisis, sex offender treatment, and biological respite for children in the home. The Stafford County Children's Services Act actually allocates 5% of their entire funding or budget to foster care prevention. So working with children that could potentially come into the state's custody, come into the custody of my department, they put 5% of their budget towards prevention services to work with children that are at risk of being removed from their home, to try to put services in place to keep the child, either if not in their home, in a family setting, in a relative's home, or something of that nature. Children served by the program include children that are in special education or maybe in a private day school setting. They're going to a private day school because they're unable to be educated in the mainstream classroom with their peers, either because of behavioral problems or mental health issues that would prevent them from being educated in the classroom. Children, of course, as I mentioned, that are in foster care and in the custody of the Department of Social Services. Children that are being served by the 15th District Juvenile Court Services Unit that may have delinquency issues or juvenile criminal issues that they may be involved with, that are involved with the Court Services Unit, as well as children involved with who are delinquent or truant, and those also being served, as I mentioned, by the Community Services Board, the Rappahannock Area Community Services Board. Children that may be emotionally disturbed, mental illness or other disabilities, and have severe mental health needs are also served by the funding of the Children's Services Act. Other ways that Donna's office, the Human Services Office, serves the community is they work with partner agencies throughout the community, the nonprofit organizations that provide services that hopefully fill in the cracks where the government and other quasi-government, like the Community Services Board agencies, are unable to meet the need. They work with agencies such as SERVE, the Rappahannock Council on Domestic Violence, Empower House, the Area Agency on Aging, Hope House, Micah Ministries, Thurman Brisbane, Homeless Shelter. You all may have heard of some of those entities that exist in our community, and they work to bring them together to help collaborate services for folks in need in Stafford County, as well as the Board of Supervisors each year sets aside a portion of their budget to help fund those community agencies that provide services that part of the nonprofit world. In Donna's office works with the application process that the community agencies apply to receive funding, and there's a process that by which they all fill out the same application. They're scored by a committee of folks that then make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors about funding to ensure that they're using limited dollars available to them to fund these organizations in a way that's not funding duplicative services, and that they are collaborating and working together and holistically meeting the need. They also partner with Stafford County Public Schools to create services for at-risk special education students. I'm not sure if you all are familiar or not, some of you may be, but down at Drew Middle School, there's a Heather Empfield school there, that a private day school setting that was created within the public school system to try to meet needs of children that otherwise couldn't be educated in the mainstream classroom, but may have to be educated in a setting off-site in a private day school. But this is a private day school within the Stafford County school system that's able to do the same service and provide the same level of care and attention to the students' needs, and to educate them in an environment within the schools and at a significant cost savings to the county, because to place them in a private day school setting is very expensive. So that's an initiative that has come out of Donna's office in partnership with the schools, as well as working with my office, the Office on Youth, the United Way, Mary Washington Healthcare, in developing opportunities for grants and long-term funding sources for folks that in need in our community. So that is some of the goals that the Human Services Office has, is to collaborate with other community organizations to expand resources and build capacity to meet the needs of at-risk children and adults in our community, coordinating and communicating among the current human services agencies, bringing us all together to be certain that we're working to meet needs in a comprehensive and fashion, and we're working together. And also, if you were to go to the Stafford County website, you would find that there is in the Human Services section, there's a plan for human services that was adopted by our Board of Supervisors, and the Human Services Office works on implementing that plan. So those are just a handful of the things. Can you imagine an office of 3 people doing all those things? But those are many of the things that Donna and her office provides to the community and works in collaboration with my office and other child and adult serving agencies, both here in Stafford as well as throughout the larger planning district. Her office was the guiding office behind the town hall meetings that was mentioned earlier that provided the opioid sessions that were there was one session in each of the localities within Planning District 16. I don't think the one in the city of Fredericksburg or Spotsylvania has actually taken place yet. We had the one here in Stafford about 2-3 weeks ago at Brook Point High School. But it's an opportunity to look. We have recognized as a community, not just here in Stafford, but throughout the planning district, that this is a crisis and that we do need to have resources in place in order to meet the needs of people that are facing addiction, or family members that are facing, have loved ones that are facing addiction, so that we're trying to be proactive in putting some of those things in place so that they don't all just become involved with the criminal justice system like the gentleman asked earlier. So those are, I put several handouts, both from my office as well as from the Human Services office, from Donna's office, on the table at the back, and please help yourself to them when you leave. It will explain in much more detail some of the things I talked about just now, and if Donna was here, I'm sure she'd do a much better job than I have of sharing this information with you. But before I move on to social services, any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
The private day school within Drew Middle,
Mm-hmm.
are there plans to expand that to other schools in the county?
There are plans to expand that. We also have a specialized school within Stafford High School. It's not exactly like it's not a public day school like the one at the Heather Empfield School at Drew is, but there is a special school that meets the needs of some students that would be placed outside of the school system as well at Stafford High School. But there's constant discussions going on with the school system as well as the state, who helps to fund some of these programs, so that we can attempt to expand those programs. But yes, that is a goal. Yes, sir.
Do we get children from other jurisdictions that come to Stafford to participate in that school?
No, sir. Because the need of the Stafford school population is much greater than the capacity of the school itself, so we don't accept students from other localities. Now, there may be some private day schools here that are private entities here in Stafford that students from other jurisdictions may come to during the day, and then they would go back home in the evening. But most of the private day schools are either in Northern Virginia or the Richmond area. And say, for example, if a child's in a private day school placement in Richmond, Stafford County is still required to provide transportation to that child to and from that school each day. And that's not counting, the cost of the school, the education, because a lot of times the students are in settings where they need to be, ratio 1-to-5 teacher to students, or, sometimes depending upon the severity of the issue, maybe even smaller. So all that we can do to support efforts and also to support the state, get the state to support us to have schools like the one at Drew benefits the community, keeps the children here in our community, and also helps to reduce the very expensive cost of that. Well, great question. Any other questions about human services? I'm going to move on now and tell you about some things that I think more about, at least I should anyway, which is within the Department of Social Services. And so that I don't ramble too much, I'll stick to my notes here. But I want to share some things with you. In the Department of Social Services here in Stafford, we work for a board that's appointed by the Board of Supervisors. Unlike the Commonwealth's attorney, who is a constitutional officer and who is elected, many of the other department heads here in the county work for the county administrator. But for social services, there's a board that's appointed to a local Board of Public Welfare that's appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and that's who I work for. And it's a 3-member board. Our board members are Pastor Fred Donahoe, he's the chairman, Barbara Hamilton, she's a member at large and our vice chairperson, and then we always have one member from the Board of Supervisors on the Board of Social Services, and currently that's Gary Snellings from the Hartwood District is on the Board of Social Services. Our department, just like the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, one of our biggest, and many of the county offices, honestly, but one of our biggest challenges is that the growth in the county and the size of our caseload has really grown beyond our capacity to meet the need in the way that I would like for us to. I think that our office does a very good job of meeting the need of our citizens, but as Nicole and I talk often, we go from, one crisis to the next, and we don't really plan for the way that we would like to do our work and to do it in an efficient way that, we're just not, we run over here and we get this taken care of, and while we're doing that, something over here pops on us, so we have to run back over here and do that. So, as Stafford has grown, you all know that, we're a community now with over 140,000 people. The social service needs in the community have grown, but the staffing levels in my department, and like I say, I'm not just saying mine, and other departments as well have not kept pace. So that's really a challenge for us. When I came to Stafford, I've been the director for a little over almost 13 years now, and when I came here in 2005, we had 60 full-time employees in the Department of Social Services. We today, in 2017, we have 61 full-time employees in the Department of Social Services. So I have one additional employee over the course of time, and during that time, during the Great Recession of 2007, 2008 kind of time frame, we lost employees. So we went from 60 to 55. So now we have gotten back up to 61. But during that same time, our caseload increased dramatically. Especially our public assistance caseload that Nicole will talk with you about later. We went from having over 5,000 total cases. That was for all programs, SNAP, which was formerly food stamps, TANF, Medicaid, 5,000 total in the entire county in 2005 to now we have over 10,000. And I have one additional person, and our caseload has more than doubled. And that's not talking about, the needs of foster care and child protective services and adult protective services and all the other things. So we are being stretched beyond our limits in terms of capacity. But I think that we have an office that has individuals that are very committed to the jobs that they do, and we have very experienced folks. We're beginning to experience some retirements with some of our most senior employees, but we have a lot of folks in a lot of key positions that have worked with us for a very long time, 25, 30 plus years, and they're able to handle and are more, dedicated and committed to doing more than, the ordinary person could, really. So I don't know what I would do if I didn't have all those experienced folks that can handle more than what a new employee or, an employee with fewer years of experience were able to handle. So that just gives you some idea of that. To give you some perspective as well, our annual budget in the Department of Social Services is about $7 million total. Most of that goes towards, some of it goes towards paying some benefits that the state runs through our office, but most of it goes towards paying for salaries and rent and just running the office itself, of which about 75% is federal and state reimbursement. So only about a quarter of that, or 25% of that $7 million is county money that comes from Stafford County. The majority comes from federal and state government. Nicole, in just a few moments, I'm going to turn the mic over to her, and she's going to share some information with you about the public assistance programs. She works very closely with all the programs in our department, but specializes with the public assistance program, so she's going to talk to you about that. But I just want to give you a little bit idea of some of the family and children's services programs that we provide to the community. We provide child protective services, so that's where we receive reports of abuse, neglect of children, and we then go out and make complete investigations, oftentimes working with the Sheriff's Department that you heard the Commonwealth's Attorney mention earlier. If it's, because sometimes child abuse or neglect situations will also rise to the level of criminal behavior. It may not always be, but sometimes it's so severe that it is. So we conduct our investigations in partnership with the Sheriff's Office, and sometimes criminal charges come out of the result of our investigation, and we work with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office to prosecute the offenders where it rises to the level of criminal activity. When we do find ourselves in a situation where we have to remove children from their homes, and as I mentioned, the funding source, which was the program I talked with you about earlier, the Children's Services Act, we take children into our custody and they are placed in foster care. And we recruit foster homes in our community, so if that's something that any of you are interested in, or friends, neighbors, church members, please let them know that we're always looking for good foster families. We train our foster families, and we are very proud of the fact that we keep over 90% of the children that are in foster care in Stafford in our community in foster homes that we have recruited and trained. There are many local governments in Virginia that place children in homes with entities like Intercept or United Methodist Family Services and others, and those are very good entities, but if we were going to place a child with United Methodist, that would probably be in a foster home that they've recruited and trained in Richmond. We believe that we should serve our children to the best of our ability here in Stafford, because that's the best opportunity for us to find permanency for that child, which is what our goal is, either to return the child home, that's first and foremost, always. If we're unable to do that, then we want to be able to place with a relative, if possible, if there's an appropriate relative placement that we can identify, and of course usually those are going to be closer to where the child lived, with the grandparents, uncles, aunts, whatever the situation might be, siblings. And if we're unable to get them either returned home or placed with a relative, we want to get them adopted, because we want that child to have permanency and to be in a permanent forever home. And we're very fortunate that we're able to get our children adopted in this community in a really good fashion. I'll give you an example. For a community our size, we have very few children in foster care. When I first came to Stafford in 2005, I had mentioned to you all, this is one area where our caseload has gone down, but the work has increased in order to get the caseload to go down, as you can imagine. But we ran between 100, 105 children each month in the custody of the Department of Social Services. We now, and anything can happen, because there have been instances where we have brought 9 children into our custody from one family in one day, so that can, but we now typically run between, 30 and 40 children in care at any one time. We presently only have 27, so I'll knock on wood for that, but that's, that can change at any time. But in order to do that, that means that our Child Protective Services workers who do ongoing CPS, it may be an instance where we got a CPS complaint, we conducted an investigation, but we determined there wasn't, we didn't need to remove the child, we just needed to work with that family, put services in place to help strengthen that family, to be able to ensure that they had before school and after school care if that was the issue, whatever the situation might be, and or to have the parents to go through parenting classes, to get some mentoring in the home. So they have to work, it would be much easier to remove the child, but that's not what we want to do. We want to keep that family intact and strengthen that family. So that's, a lot of work on our ongoing CPS workers. We receive somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,600 reports of child abuse and neglect in Stafford on an annual basis. Of those, typically, I would say, maybe a third are valid complaints. This year, we get our largest referrals from the schools. So we're the busiest when school's in session. When school's not in session, we're not quite as busy during the summer months. But when you get to those months like April and May and the first part of June, when school's going to be out for the summer, school teachers and principals and counselors, situations that they've had their eyes on all year, they know we're not going to be able to take a look at this any longer. We're not going to be there to provide services to this family, make sure that the children are coming to school, that they're getting fed, that they're, have clean clothes, whatever the situation might be. So they make a lot of referrals to us. And this year in April, we had 91 cases, valid complaints that we had to investigate, which is really, a high month for us has traditionally been 70 or something like that. So 91 was just like that. That's overwhelmed us. I mean, to get out there and to get all those investigations done, and we're required to complete that investigation within 45 days. Unless we're working with law enforcement, we can take a little bit longer than that. But, also, because Stafford is a fairly well-off community. We all know that. We're fortunate about that. We do have folks in need, about 10,000 cases or families that are receiving public assistance. But that's low compared to some other counties our size. But, child abuse and neglect and adult abuse and neglect and some of those kind of things, they don't know the difference between one income and the next. It happens no matter, what the financial background of the family may be. So, as the county continues to grow, our workload in that respect continues to grow. We were talking about the opioid crisis a moment ago. Of the 27 children that we have in care, all 27 families have some level of substance abuse, the biological family from which the child was removed. It may not have been the primary reason for removal, but it's a secondary issue or a third tertiary issue that's going on in that family that makes it challenging for us to get the family stabilized to the point that we can return the children home. So it is a big impact on the work that we do. Some of the other services that we provide are respite for, our foster parents. We have families, foster families that just may provide, they're a trained family that may just provide respite on the weekend or while a family is out of town to give them a break. So that, because we don't like to move children from one foster home to another. These children have been through enough. They all have, not all, but most all have, attachment and fears of being moved from family to family. So, when we've got a situation that may not be going well, it may just be that we need to put them in a respite placement for 2 or 3 days to give the family a chance to take a breather, a little break, because these are very challenging children sometimes. We do child custody investigations that are ordered by the court. We provide adoption assistance. What I was saying about, and I got off track, which I do sometimes, but our adoption between March of this year and October of this year, we found permanency through adoptions or return home or placement with a relative of 10 children in foster care. So that keeping that number at 27 or 30 or 35 is also, like I say, we're working it on one end by trying to strengthen the family with ongoing CPS, but then on the other end, we're trying to get the children that are in our care out of our care, because children don't need to live in foster care. They need to live with a permanent family. That's where children thrive and do the best. So we're constantly working either to get that child back home, to put the services in place that strengthens that family so that we can, or to find a relative placement, or to find an adoptive home, someone that wants to be that child's forever family so that that child never has to be worried about moving from one placement to another again. We currently have 100, we run between 115 and 120 adoption cases that we're following at any one time. If a child is adopted we have children that are adopted at 6 months of age. We had one child because, the child came into our custody because the mother under the Safe Haven Act, right after giving birth, dropped the child off at one of the county fire stations. So we took custody of the child without knowing who the parent was. So there was no way that we could find a relative or anyone to place the child back home. So we got that child adopted within, a relatively short period of time, 6 months. But at that we will follow that child and that family and provide, ongoing support and adoption assistance until the child is 18 years old and becomes an adult on their own. And we're also very fortunate. We like to pat ourselves on the back, but we do it gently because we know that it could change at any time. But we have really never had an adoption in Stafford that has disrupted, fell apart, because of the fact that we let our families know up front, and we work with them to say, this is forever. This is your child now. It's just like your biological child. So when we have them, and families sometimes that come to us and say, I just can't take it anymore. We want to give these children back up. We say, no, we're going to work with you to make sure that you keep the child in your home. And we've been very fortunate, but we have adoption support groups that we run and all kinds of things to try to strengthen those families and to keep them intact. All right, let's see. Did I go over all that? We, of course, provide adult services and adult protective services to the community. That's really a growing area for us, too, because we investigate reports of adult abuse, adult neglect, exploitation, financial exploitation of adults. Oftentimes, we do this in conjunction with law enforcement as well. Adult services and adult protective services is really a tough one. It's unlike child protective services. We have a lot of power. We're given a lot of power by the state. If we believe that there's a situation that's unsafe for a child, the Department of Social Services, a law enforcement official, or a doctor in the Commonwealth of Virginia has the authority to remove a child for 72 hours, and then we must go to court and get a court order to continue to have that child out of the home. But we have the ability, if we think this situation is unsafe, for 72 hours, we can make the decision on the spot to remove the child. With adult abuse and neglect, because adults have the right of self-determination, and that's something that judges are very leery to take away, and I think that they should be, because before we can do that, a judge has to determine that the person is unable and incompetent to make decisions for him or herself. So just because we have a lot of self-neglect with adults, and just because they're not living the way you or I may think that they should, and we get a lot of calls and about that from neighbors and friends and relatives, but we don't have the authority to change the way that they want to live, as long as they have the right to make decisions for themselves, even though they may be making decisions and we may think it's bad decisions, but they have the right to make those decisions as well, as long as they have capacity to make them. So and so we have to explain that a lot. But we have a food program in partnership with St. Peter's Lutheran Church, just right up on Courthouse Road, where our adult services staff makes food deliveries to our adult services and adult protective services caseload every Monday. And, it's amazing, the work that they have to do sometimes to build a rapport with someone, because we go out to their home and we tell them who we are and why we're there, and they're like, get out of here. Get off my porch. I don't want to ever see you again. And we, slowly they will ask them, they'll find, well, can I just bring you a box of food on Mondays? And, maybe the second time we've been out, and then they may say, well, just leave it on the porch. So we'll leave it on the porch, and then eventually they'll open the door and come out on the porch and talk to us. And then they may invite us in eventually and say, you want to sit down and have a cup of coffee? Now, this may be a year and a half, 2 years going by, but sometimes we're still able to help them make changes in their lives and to see, that we're just there to help them, and we care about them, and we want to support them in their ability to have self-determination. But it takes a long time to build a rapport with folks like that, and a lot of times that's what they're doing. I think I mentioned we do provide parent education, and we have parent education classes that we facilitate and run for our parents that are either, have children removed or in foster care, or children that are working with ongoing child protective services, or just available to the community. Anybody, any new parent, anyone, because we have them in age ranges like 0 to 4, 4 to 11, and so on and so forth, parenting teens. So they're open to the community. We provide resources that are available for folks that are looking for things for their children to be able to do, or for the summer activities, that kind of thing. We have a volunteer program where we work with folks to come in and volunteer in our office. And one of the big things that we do is we work with the community and with our nonprofit partners and churches and clubs and organizations to provide food and gift assistance to folks during Thanksgiving and Christmas. There's a volunteer and sponsor form available on the social services portion of the county website if you're interested in any of that. But we last year provided Thanksgiving and Christmas meals and gifts, to the children in the home or to the elderly. We do provide gifts to the elderly as well. Just small things, but it makes them feel so special. But to over 750 families. Now, there's a lot of individuals within those families, but over 750 families that we were able to provide, a holiday meal for either Thanksgiving, Christmas, or both, and some types of gifts at the Christmas season. So. I think I've talked a lot, and I'm going to stop there. See, I was picking on George, and I'm just as bad. I'm going to ask Nicole to come up and to share a little bit of information with you about our public assistance programs. That folks, unlike our child and family services programs, we provide those to anyone in the community where there's a need. Our public assistance programs, you have to apply for those and be determined eligible based on federal and state criteria and rules. So she's going to share some of that. Okay, Nicole.
Thanks. I know it's a little late, so just kind of want to touch on a few items regarding the public assistance programs. To be honest, what we try to do is do intervention as well as prevention. Michael had the opportunity of talking a little bit about some of the prevention ways with the holiday program. Getting folks in, kind of having that conversation. It's light, it's airy. You get a better understanding early on as to what's going on with that family. And it's not like, someone knocking on your door and saying, oh, is there a problem? We also do intervention services also, more prevention services in the schools, where we do a little bit of volunteer work that come in. We also have a lot of individuals that work alongside in looking at when it comes to nutritional assistance programs. So it may be something as simple as a child coming in and they're filling out the reduced lunch program. And so what we would then do is offer opportunities as to them being able to fill out for a SNAP program as well, if we think that there are additional needs and supports. We also work with Head Start program because we've noticed that there is a link between children who are within the Head Start program with also needing additional supports and services. Our goal, is around about Halloween time, so I like to use the analogy. Our goal is to kind of be like the spider weaving the web. It's small, it's invisible, but it provides a lot of strength and support. Okay, so that person that's walking in, there's no wrong door. It may be simple where they're coming in from foster care, that they need additional supports. Foster mom is saying, hey, we're in the process of getting things up and moving for this child. It also may be where CPS have become involved. It may be a call from the schools. So what we try to do is get the applications in place. That is being able to assist hands-on, a lot of times, as well as computerized with VACMS, of them being able to go to Common Help. If you go online to Stafford County's website, you actually see a little button. It says Common Help. All they have to do is click the button, okay? And from clicking the button, the application opens up. and they have the opportunity to apply for just about anything, okay? Now, eligibility is just that. You know, when it comes to benefits, it's not like we have all this wonderful money just sitting here. I wish we did. But what we do have is 100% funded money if you meet criteria. And that's the big thing, is that you have to meet the criteria. So it's not as if we're saying, oh, well, this person can have it, but, you know, I don't like your shirt, you know. Instead, it's actually really going through and thoroughly evaluating. So the process may take a little bit of time, okay? And that's where sometimes it gets a little frustrating for a client in walking in the doors, and in understanding that, yes, we do have to get verifications. We do have to ensure that this is correct because it is federally funded. We want to ensure that we can reach as many people as we possibly can with this money, because this is what we have for this year. So reaching the masses is our goal, and at the same time effectively reaching the masses to where we're not having to go back. And there is another component which we do have, which is a fraud component of being able to review those cases. If a person is receiving funding and they should not, then we do go through. We will prosecute in the whole 9 yards. So I like the way that we've had the opportunity of really doing a check and balance there. But when you're looking at it, that person walks in the doors or they get on the computer, they type their information in. From there, that application comes into us. We do have what's considered a screener. The screener evaluates immediately as to whether or not this case is something that needs to be done within 7 days, or it could take up to 45 days. Or, you know, with some cases you go through and there's additional verifications that need to occur, okay? So that person is having constant conversation and a lot of mail that's coming back and forth. I have to be honest. It is a lot of mail that comes back and forth and letting them know the status of what's happening on their case. That being said, it then moves over, and so you have what's considered our intake team. That intake person, that intake worker goes in and immediately contacts to set up an appointment for the client to either come in or to do a telephone interview, okay? From that telephone interview, what you're doing at that point in time is really kind of assessing as to what the needs are. That client may say, you know, I really wrote down on my application of Medicaid, okay? And Medicaid reaches the masses. So when you say Medicaid, the first thing the person is thinking is, okay, are you thinking, okay, for just regular doctor's appointments? But then you get more information and finding out, well, you know, my wife is in a nursing home, okay? And we need to continue to move forward in being able to pay these bills. When it comes to Medicaid, it reaches all socioeconomic backgrounds. It's not as if you can just say, hey, this person, we all, you know, we'll get to a point where we will probably require Medicaid. The average when it comes to a monthly payment, when it comes to a long-term care nursing home, is around about $7,500 a month that you're having to pay out. So even when we save up all this wonderful money, at the end of the day, you're still going to need a little bit of assistance. So being able to kind of help that person through the process and understanding what that means. With Medicaid, there are a couple of, you know, pieces that come along with it, of being able to be evaluated. That evaluation has to come through the health department along with us. That's looking at regular daily living skills, you know, whether or not can you, you know, eat, you know, are you capable of dressing yourself, clothing yourself? Are you able to balance your checkbook? Are you able, you know, to ensure that you're taking your medicine on a regular basis? Those things are evaluated by the health department. And then on the other side, you have as to what the eligibility needs are, okay? So you may have a person that just needs, say, a home health provider, you know? I'm independent, I'm living at my house, but I need someone to come in every once in a while to kind of help me in packing my Medi-Planner, help me with those assistance. That's what long-term care Medicaid is capable of doing. You also have what would fall for intellectual disabilities. Individuals that may live in group homes type settings that have additional needs. We all know, you know, there's a lot of support surrounding it, but it is a lot of work and a lot of care, you know. Our goal in Stafford County is not to have a lot of intermediate care facilities. And intermediate care facilities, it used to be one of the best places to put your loved one, but guess what? We believe in community just as much when it comes to foster care. So providing that funding along the way as well of being able to have a person who can live independently as much as possible. So we evaluate that on a regular basis, that's annually. And then you also have the regular doctor visits that folks may have as well. Being able to look at when it comes to younger children, they have many, many different needs. I know I have 3 myself and trying to keep up with those, and we're back and forth and going to regular visits, healthy well visits, well checks, prenatal care as well. So that's where Medicaid kind of falls along in the scope, okay? Then we have what's considered another program, which is temporary assistance to needy families. And so it is also, like I said, another one of those little strings of the web, that's intricately kind of placed in there, is to help the family stay together financially. Mom, dad may have a job, but it's not meeting those needs. It's being able to ensure that we kind of bridge that gap until they're able to kind of cross over and being able to move towards total self-sufficiency. From there, you have, SNAP, supplemental nutrition, which is, like I said, being able to look at what's needed food-wise for the family. That on top of having WIC programs in place. We work with the health department, and especially when it comes to prenatal care, of ensuring that both have been evaluated. Our ultimate goal is that every child should have food in the home. That's really what it boils down to. So when we talk about the no wrong door entry, it may start off, like I said, and then being able to go ahead and apply for reduced lunch at school. Or we also have a program which is outreach through Donna's team as well, Human Services team, during the summer, as to where it's a summer program. The kids come in just to eat lunch, and from eating lunch, we know that, okay, we may have identified a family and are capable of reaching out to them and letting them know what other programs that can support and help and aid. Along the way, our ultimate goal is for folks to move towards that level of self-sufficiency. So we do actually have a couple of self-sufficiency programs. If you notice, there's a whole wave. Like I said, we try to stay, the ultimate goal is to stay in prevention, but we move over into that intervention, which then gets that individual over to self-sufficiency, okay? So when we're looking at the self-sufficiency component, it's really that person is looking for a job, but may not have the additional skills that's needed at that point in time, okay? And that's, it's a VIEW program that's in place, which is Virginia Initiative for Employment, not Welfare. That individual is on a regular basis of looking for employment. Once they get employment, they have to keep at least a minimum of 35 hours for them to continue to receive their TANF, which is a temporary assistance to needy families. These programs are linked together for that, to be able to chain that individual and being able to move forward to where they can move towards total independence. And ultimately, you're having from step one of, I just need to fill out this application from a child, and being able to get the Medicaid in place. But then you find out along the way, I do need a little bit more food in my house. Oh, you know what? This isn't the best job. Why? I don't have a high school diploma. This program actually will provide for that individual to get the education that they need. We connect those supports of ensuring that they're going to school. We do job training as well, pay for job training as well, and we coordinate services in the community to get them to the point of being employable, okay? So whatever barriers that there may be, which there tend not to just be one, we remove barrier after barrier after barrier. That could be, well, I never finished high school. Why didn't you finish high school? Well, I had my first baby. Okay. What happened at that point in time? There may be some other issues that's there. Well, I had always have had difficulty in trying to stay focused, and I tried this and it didn't work, and so I just gave up. So that's where psychological evaluation comes into place, to figure out what's going on with that individual, to remove the barriers. It may be a medication that the person needs to be on. It may be therapy that the person needs to go through. Those things are actually put in place through the VIEW program. All that you have to have is that willingness to succeed. So that VIEW worker will actually hand walk that individual, even if it comes to, hey, you know what? I got the job, but I don't know what to wear. Or I have the job, but you know what? I don't have transportation to get to this job. How am I going to get there? We provide those levels of support to move them forward. We even move forward in regards to childcare as well. You know, the ultimate goal is being able to move that individual from I need to I have. I can do this. You know, is it easy? No, but guess what? It gets easier each step that I make along the way. So our goal, you know, like I said, stays really seamless. We're behind the scenes. We try to help out as much as possible. Out of 140,000 that live in Stafford, we have 4% that fall below poverty line. Most people don't realize that because the 4%, when they come in the doors, they come in and you know what? They put on the face of, I have it together, until we get behind the scenes and we start to kind of peel back that onion to see what's needed for that individual. And from there, we provide the supports, we connect them and link them as needed, and hopefully, you know, they've had a good experience along the way. Is it challenging in the beginning? Yes, it is, you know. And along the way, especially when it comes to making certain for the verifications, making certain that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, you know, on that application. Did I check the right box? Oh, maybe I shouldn't have checked that box, you know. Those are some of the pieces of that dialogue back and forth with the benefits worker. And then from there, they move from the benefits worker over, hopefully, to the self-sufficiency worker. And sometimes they just stay here at the benefits worker because they're able to move forward. And that's ultimately the goal that we have for them. So it kind of goes through. We have other programs that are assistance as well, which is LIHEAP, which is low-income housing for energy assistance program. I always call it LIHEAP. So basically, what we do is also identify individuals that need energy. That could be cooling, that could be heating, in making certain that they're, you know, especially in the winter when it's really cold, that we assist with helping and paying those bills. We also help especially for vulnerable population in the summertime when it's ridiculously hot, that we have cooling in their homes as well. So it's trying to make certain that we provide as many resources as possible to kind of help along the way to bridge those gaps, and help that person kind of be able to move towards that level of self-sufficiency. Other than that, I think that pretty much kind of taps into it, because I know that Michael talked a little bit about the holiday program as well, and I'm pretty short and brief. Any questions?